Prologue: Creeping Death. Hindu Kush Mountains, a decade earlier. In the lonesome and high country of Afghanistan's rugged mountains, where jagged peaks claw at the sky like the teeth of a ravenous beast, a lone figure moved with a ghostly silence. Clad in weathered fatigues that blended seamlessly with the barren terrain, Hunter Moss cut over the unforgiving landscape, moving with the moon-cast shadows. From years of tracking and hunting men, Hunter honed an ability to sense the presence of his adversaries long before they drew near. Taliban insurgents, their voices carried by the wind, unknowingly began to march toward a fight they couldn't believe. Hunter stopped, blood as war paint over his face behind a cedar tree that rustled hard with the blows of storm winds through the hillside. The desolation of his soul, wrought by the ceaseless warring, gave him a hollow and dulled look. Eyes encircled by red omens looked out toward the encroaching team. For the first time he was killing for only himself. This was no longer about duty or some mission. This was primal. Hunter wanted these men's blood. As the enemies drew closer, Hunter melded with nature, becoming one with the wilderness. Moving unseen alongside his targets, he watched them head right into his field of traps. A crude tripwire here, cunningly concealed amidst the jagged rocks, a pit dug deep into the earth there, shrouded by the deceptive veil of loose sand. Hunter braced himself as the first unsuspecting insurgent stumbled into his snare. Quick as a whip, he struck from the shadows, dispatching his prey with lethal efficiency. The crack of bone and the gurgle of blood was swallowed by the roar of thunder over the mountains. No one heard the man fall. Lightning sparked a brightness into the sky. In that flash, the man's comrade saw himself standing alone. One by one, they fell victim to Hunter's deadly arsenal, their cries of anguish lost in the storm and the wind. Hunter was a force of nature unleashed, a phantom violently taking revenge upon those responsible for the death of his team. The ambush left only himself and Ratigan. The team leader, Ratigan, had spent dusk searching for Hunter. Deep into the hold of the mountains now, it was growing full dark. Hateful storm clouds moved in and stole light from the moon. Seeking respite, Ratigan took shelter under a drooping tree. He was tired and broken from the violent day that would not end. Ratigan took the canteen from his side and drank deeply. Unwilling to lose another man, he forged ahead. Pulling his rifle to his shoulder, Ratigan moved closer to the sound of a man screaming. One of the insurgents' hearts tightened as he discerned that same scream echoing through the storm. Had it been another, he might have ignored it, but not him. That was the voice of his very closest friend, a man he had grown up with, someone that meant everything to him. Having lost sight of the men to his right and to his left, it took everything in him to wade toward the sound of his friend alone. Death was out there. A monster watched from the trees. The whole mountain seemed alive, and its wrath was inevitable. Tremors of fear unsettled the insurgent's grip on his rifle. Searing nausea gripped his gut. He steeled himself against the instinct to double over and release the bile. His dry throat tightened, suffocating him as he stepped forward. A sudden crack shattered the eerie silence, jolting him to his core. He stood stiff, frozen between steps. It wasn't clear to him if the sound had come from his own boot or that of his pursuer. Warmth pulsed through his body as he held his breath, his senses all focused on the forest's whispers. Slowly he turned his head, muscles rigid with tension. There was a rustle that brought the man's eyes skyward, and as the man's heart leapt, so did Hunter. The cowboy descended from a high branch, pouncing on the frightened insurgent. With deadly precision, his blade found its mark, plunging deep into the man's flesh, leaving him in a puddle of violence. Those sounds of pain Ratigan had heard still lapped like waves and spread through the killing fields. Ratigan used it as a beacon. The sound was sharper and louder as he closed in. It sounded like the man was grunting and struggling with muscular effort between his grim shouts of agony. Slowing with caution, Ratigan peeled his eyes toward the movement he was noticing through the trees. Father Time was not on Radigan's side. He was getting older, and his eyes weren't what they once were. It took another stretch of quiet footfalls to bring him close enough to see, and what he saw was a man driven through by a massive stake. The primitive wooden spear had cleared the lower part of the man's gut, and he was bent unnaturally at an angle to keep the pressure off as he attempted to tug the stake out. It made Radigan sick to see the young man struggling. He quickly aimed down his sights, looking to put the man out of his misery. Before he could get a shot off, an arrow punched through the insurgent's eye, and his body slumped over, defeated. Radigan recognized that handcrafted arrow. This was his man. This was Hunter. He cut a primitive and almost grotesque figure there against the cobalt sky. Blood dripped from his frame. The massive bulk of his shoulders rose and fell like the tides of some great sea as he took ragged breaths. Savagery lay like a shroud over what Radigan knew to be the civilized man from West Texas. Before him was nothing more than the manifestation of the Wild West. Radigan made a bird call, a familiar sign the pair used to communicate with one another time and time again on the battlefield. Hunter stalked through the rain and the dark, eyes scanning for more enemies. There were none. He answered the call with a whistle of his own. Radigan started toward the sound, adrenaline flushing out of him. The anticipated relief died on sight of his friend. There was something frightening about him, something unusually animal. Radigan did not see his friend in those bloodshot eyes. "Hunter?" Radigan called out. He stepped closer. Hunter did not make any sort of move. He remained standing firm on the incline, bow in one hand and buckknife in the other. "Hunter, it's over. It's time to go home." "This isn't over." The sky cracked open as celestial fire sliced through the clouds. The woods lit, and Radigan saw that he was again standing alone. Hunter had disappeared.
It's not over. You hear me? You got a heart pumping blood through you, right? Can't you feel the cold air in your lungs? You're here and you're free. Book ain't written yet. Don't be sending down the pen, and don't go on riding with old ink.